For many tabletop gamers, the crunchiness of a rules system is the measuring stick for the quality and longevity of a gaming system. Now, I'm on record as being far more on the Barbosa end of the spectrum, with rules being more like guidelines than hard and fast things that you have to stick to 100% of the time. But for those gamers that do love the crunch, there are a few systems revered more than D&D 3.5. The dominant system of the early to mid 2000s, this system became the gold standard. The D20 system, with its open game license, can still be felt today in the prominence of D20 based systems. And it's not for nothing. There are some really great things that you can look back on from this version of D&D and pick and choose what you want to bring with you into your current game, whether it's 5th edition or some other system. So today, I'm going to rank my top 10 3.5 D&D supplements that I think can help your game right now. Disclaimer: writing for tabletop games has come a long way in the past 20 years, with plenty of distance still left to cover. So, approach all of these books with the appropriate amount of caution. For tabletop supplements written by teams made up of primarily white men in the early 2000s. Just need to put that out there. Onto the list. Number 10, Complete Warrior. So this is a guide for combat for all classes. It's not particularly just for martial characters, but one of the longest lingering questions, especially in the modern tabletop setting for fantasy characters, is how to make martial characters still interesting once you start reaching higher levels, especially when compared to magic users. And a lot of that comes through in the narrative when you can successfully accomplish that. And Complete Warrior provides a wide array of prestige classes that can be used as conceptual jumping off points for your martial character to think, okay, so I'm making a fighter or I'm making a rogue. What is the flavor around them? What is the conceptual idea behind this character beyond just the class? And this book has some great ideas for that. But the true gem of this book is chapter 4. It provides for dungeon masters ideas on different martially focused campaigns that you can run. It has martial organizations that show how diverse martial characters and the thinking behind martial fighting can be, as well as magic items that you can use as points of inspiration to port over into your current system. There's a lot in this book that focuses on the martial side of a fantasy adventure that I think falls through the crack a lot of times, and I definitely recommend checking it out. Number 9, Book of Exalted Deeds. The appeal of many characters like Batman or the Punisher or Deadpool, these iconic anti-heroes, is based out of the idea that purely good characters are boring. Characters like Superman or Captain America just inherently don't have as many interesting stories to tell. But Book of Exalted Deeds does a great job of providing ways to play unironically purely good characters in a way that isn't dry, isn't boring, and isn't lawful stupid. It also has great ideas for dungeon masters for running campaigns for purely good characters. How do you craft interesting stories that these unironically pure good characters can still operate in without feeling the need to try and force them to compromise who they are? And another shining point for me in this book is the prestige classes that it offers and how it can be a jumping off point for a character concept as opposed to something behind a particular class. You could obviously bring some mechanics into this, but you could just use it as a narrative thing as well. A couple of my highlights are the Fated Champion, which is a character who knows before the start of the campaign that they are destined to be a martyr for their cause. Like, they know through prophecy or something that they are going to die for their cause. And how do you carry that weight as a character? How do you play that in a convincing and meaningful way? And then on the other side of it, the Redeemed Villain is a really cool character concept in this book, because a character that is good, is purely good, but can understand how somebody can fall down the path of evil and do these heinous things and still maintain their goodness is far more interesting to me than some edgelord who tortures people for the greater good. So I love Book of Exalted Deeds, and I think it does a lot of really cool things with pure good characters and how to run games for them in a meaningful way. Number 8, Dragon Magic. Now, to the surprise of many of you, dragons are a big part of D&D. Spoiler alert, one of the D's does not stand for doggos. Maybe it should, but Dragon Magic is a book that does a great job of providing a lot of different avenues for using dragons in its relationship to players and the campaign and how DMs use them and how players can use abilities. And, 5th edition has a fair amount of draconic content, but a lot of the more narratively driven stuff exists just in the Tyranny of Dragons adventure set, where there's kind of a bog standard cult seeks to bring about destruction by bringing back Tiamat, and it's been done before. Not to say that it's bad, but it's pretty standard. And Dragon Magic provides a lot of interesting twists on the idea of dragons and different draconic style monsters that you can easily recreate in 5th edition just by plucking their iconic abilities out of their monster card for 3.5. And then also a horde of interesting spells that you can give to your players to let them tap into draconic magic, which seems super cool. Magic items and a lot of ideas for how to run dragon-centered campaigns. If you want them to play a big role in your game, Dragon Magic is a great book to check out. Number 7, Weapons of Legacy. So one of the biggest disconnects between the heroes of fantasy and myth and trying to replicate them at a table is the loot. Aragorn had Anduril, Han Solo has his blaster, Thor has Mjolnir, but for D&D characters or tabletop characters in general, it's a +1 sword here, boots of elven kind there, and then you upgrade stuff as you go on, and it's hard to have a signature thing. But Weapons of Legacy provides you with the tools as a dungeon master to let your player hold on to their familial sword that they wrote into their backstory that's so important to them, or provide them with a extremely powerful magic item that will unlock power over time. So you're not gifting them this hugely powerful over-leveled thing, but rather giving them something that will over time become this huge boon that will help the party in their most dire moments. Now, I will say, Weapons of Legacy is a crunchy boy. It is a book that has a lot of rules in it, which is why it's lower on this list. This is actually one of my favorite books and favorite concepts from 3.5. I adore this book, but I put it way down on the list because it isn't the easiest thing to port over into other systems. I've tried a couple of times, and it's difficult. But if you can tweak things and figure out what's going to work well for your table, it's a phenomenal book. And additionally, there's a ton of great ideas for running campaigns and adventures that introduce Weapons of Legacy or feature Weapons of Legacy, these things that grow with power over time with the players and can have a big impact. So if you're looking to create a campaign centered around Excalibur, that style of story, then Weapons of Legacy is a must pick up. Number 6, Dragonmarked. Now, longtime fans of the Geek Pantheon will know that Eberron is my favorite setting to run and play in. I adore it, and so don't be surprised when this is not the last Eberron book to show up on this list. But I will say that this is not a setting-reliant supplement. It is a setting book, but there are ways to utilize it. Now, many sci-fi near-future settings like Cyberpunk or the Resistance board games or Jennifer Government feature corporations that have gained power over time to the point where they can exploit common people to their own ends and isn't escapist fantasy fun. But if you want to include some corporate politicking alongside some hereditary exceptionalism into your games, then Dragonmarked is the book for you. Now, to be fair, the book doesn't paint any kind of negative light on any side of this. And just in chapter 1 alone, there are so many stories that can be told. It's a breakdown of all the different Dragonmarked houses, the major players within those houses, what they want. And there's so much in this book that you could take and put into another setting. It's exceptional houses. And the only thing that you're really adding to it is that they have a hereditary birthmark almost that grants them magical abilities. That's what you're working with here. But there's so much story to be told with this supplement that I think it's great. It's one of the strongest books and concepts to come out of Eberron, and I think could work in a lot of different settings. Number 5, Grand History of the Realms. This book is on my list despite the fact that my knowledge of the Forgotten Realms setting can be fit on a postage stamp. There was a spell plague and a famous hamster. That's what I got. But I like this book a lot because it takes the 37,000 years of history at the time of 3.5 of the Forgotten Realms and conveys it in under 200 pages. It does it in such an evocative way that you can read through and you don't feel overwhelmed. You don't get tired just reading huge chunks of text, but it does a good job of highlighting the important moments by providing you like supplemental information, but everything else is just kind of bullet points next to the year. And even though it forced me to read about the first, second, and third spider wars, stop fighting spiders. You're never going to win, and they serve an important ecological function as well. But in spite of that, I really enjoyed this book, and I think it is a masterclass in conveying the history and lore of a setting in an easy to digest way. So if you are coming up with your own homebrew setting, or you're trying to find a way to convey the important parts of your setting that you're setting your campaign in to your players before the campaign starts, this is a great book to look through and get some ideas on how to effectively communicate that stuff without overwhelming your players with 12 pages of just block text. Number 4, Charn, City of Towers, another Eberron book. Shocking. So in most standard fantasy settings, when you think of a big city, you're typically dealing with a pretty basic template of, High Lord living in a stronghold section, guards serving the noble lord's function throughout the city, tradespeople and merchants in the economic hub maintaining the economy in relative peace, and then everybody else going about doing their business. And then you insert your problem. Is the noble lord corrupt? Are the guards oppressive? Is there a famine? What's going on? And you just go from there. But in Charn, City of Towers, it is a living, breathing metropolis. It has a true metropolitan feel to a fantasy setting. You have skyscrapers, you have flying boats zipping in between those skyscrapers that are hundreds of stories tall, thousands of stories tall. It's built on the ruins of another ancient city, and something that goes so far into making this feel like a real city are class-based redundancies. There's not just a warehouse district and a market. There's a upper class market that you can go to if you're looking for finer goods or fancy dresses. Or there is the lower class market down in the bottom levels of the city where you would go if you needed to maybe get some illegal goods. Find the black market. It's going to be down there. And it's like that for all the different districts. There's recreational districts for the upper class and lower class and middle class, residential districts. And so all of these redundancies make the city feel real and feel alive. And there are so many stories to be told in this city. Eberron Renewed, the actual play podcast that I DM for, is set in Charn, and there's so much to work with. It's a great book, and I highly recommend checking it out. Number 3, Elder Evils. There are many people who say that a campaign is only as good as the big bad evil that's driving the action. And that can be a lot of pressure on a DM to come up with a compelling villain that is driving the action and going to be a satisfying foe for the party to go up against. And an additional problem is, when do you expose them to the party? Because as soon as you expose something to the party, they're going to try and kill it a lot of times, especially if it's a bad thing. And you're only a handful of bad dice rolls from your villain being gone forever. I've been there. And so Elder Evils is such a great book because, first off, it provides some really cool villains and concepts that you can just pull from, but they have fully realized villains in the book that are super cool and super scary and ominous and threatening. So definitely read the book for them. But also there are great templates on how to expose the villain to the party. They have tiered knowledge about the villain where, okay, if you roll a certain amount on religion or history or streetwise, you will know this about the villain, or you'll know this about the villain, or this. And building lieutenants that can have strong ties to your main villain so that it's very easily conveyed that this is just the mini boss, and how to have them link back to the main villain. Apocalyptic heralds, like plagues almost, that come about before your villain actually arrives if you're doing kind of a cosmic horror thing. things that can communicate to the party something bad is on its way. So they don't have to see the villain face to face to feel their presence. And I think that's a great way to approach conveying your big bad evil to the party. And I think this book slams it out of the park. Number 2, Tome of Magic. So, for as prevalent as magic is in most fantasy settings, but especially D&D 5th edition, you would think it would be easier to narratively convey the differences between different types of magic, different schools of magic, different casting styles. But a lot of times that's something that does fall by the wayside, where your wizard and your sorcerer and your druid all feel very similar in the moment when they're casting. And Tome of Magic, the 3.5 version, is a great book to examine casting and how it's done and what it looks like and how it manifests. Now, this book provides 3 new types of magic for the 3.5 system, but you can, once again, steal. You have Pact Magic, which is different from the Warlock 5th edition Pact Magic. It's actually much scarier somehow, because you can tap into different great beings and pull their power, so you don't have the committed relationship that the Warlock does, which, yeah, is terrifying, because if you go from one to another, is the first one going to be mad that you... Anyway, Pact Magic looks really interesting, slightly terrifying. But you also have Shadow Magic and True Name Magic for all you Rothfuss fans out there. Where's Doors of Stone, Patrick? Now, this book does have a fair amount of rulesy crunch to it. Obviously, it's introducing new styles of magic, but it also provides a lot of narrative guidance on how to incorporate this different type of pact magic, how to navigate different shadow magic organizations that exist in your world, or how to effectively evoke true name magic and how a player who's tapping into that type of magic can convey it at a table in an interesting and fun way. All of those things are in there in addition to the crunch. And so I think that that's a really cool way to make your magic feel different. And there's no crunchy requirements to port anything over. Just take these concepts and slap them on your character. Talk to your DM if you're a player, or if you're a DM, talk to one of your players about, hey, I've seen this really cool different type of pact magic. Do we want to try that for the Warlock in the party? And see what happens. It might be really cool, but definitely check out Tome of Magic. Number 1, City of Stormreach. Of course, number 1 is going to be another Eberron book from me. What can I say? I'm a fanboy. But this book is special. I will say that off rip. Now, Charn City of Towers is really cool because of its scope. You're covering an entire metropolis in this book, and there's a lot of stuff in there. But City of Stormreach really benefits from the focus of it and the details that it can get into it. The page count isn't hugely different between the 2 books. I think it's about like 20 to 30 page difference. But what you get in City of Stormreach is it's filed down to a fine point. There's so much detail in this book. Every shopkeep, every landmark, every organization has a story to tell in this book. And if you want to have a cool, thriving pirate city on the edge of civilization for your game, City of Stormreach has what you want. Warring factions that debate the merits of letting guilds in from the mainland. Reference the Dragonmarked book if you want to learn more about the guilds that are encroaching in Stormreach. But you got that. You have different gangs on the street made up of refugees from the last war that are vying for control and power in this new growing city. And so much more. But more than that, this book is kind of special to me. It's really the gateway that made the first campaign that I had of D&D feel special. When we hit Stormreach and all of these different things that we could do in the city. And I have so many great gaming memories from this city, of hilarious blunders to heartbreaking character deaths. And I think it's a great city, and I think it's a great book, and I think that you all will enjoy it too if you check it out. City of Stormreach. It's on, all these books are on DM's Guild, so go give them a look over there. But this book is really special. It's a lot of fun. The current actual play that I'm on here on this channel, Kyber Shards, is set in Stormreach. So if you want to get an idea of what Stormreach is like, check out that show. But yeah, Let me know what you thought. What did I miss out on? Are there any 3.5 supplements that you think are must reads? Let me know down in the comments below, because I want to check out more. I've been reading through a lot of them, obviously putting this list together, but I know there are some that I missed out on. So let me know what your favorites are down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.